I see Jim. Hey, Mary. And I see Nancy and Rick and Robert, uh, Terry, William, Judith. Hey, Juan. Hey, Jared. We got a lot of folks joining us this afternoon. I think we are ready to get started. We Just a couple of housekeeping tips. I see a couple of AI recorders in here. I'm going to ask that we do not record this session and that any AI bots and those kinds of things are going to be removed from the room. So I'm going to ask staff to help me clean those up. But Mike, if you're ready, and Corwin, Tiara, Byron, if y'all are ready, we will get started. So good afternoon, Realtors. Welcome to this special SCR update. I am Nick Kromitis, South Carolina Realtor CEO, and I want to thank you for joining us today. As a reminder, we do not allow participants to record, so please turn off any of the AI recording bots. Our staff will have to remove those from the room here as we get going. This is our third update this month on upcoming new forms and the new FinCEN requirements. And we really appreciate you tuning in on this Friday afternoon. It is February 27th. And I don't know how it is in your part of the state, but it's a little wet and dreary where I am. Why don't y'all throw in the chat real quick what the weather is like locally for y'all? And I know if Marvin Hyde is on the call, he's probably going to be describing the liquid sunshine on the coast. That's what they call rain in Myrtle Beach, apparently, because we know it won't last forever, right? So Realtors, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We record these updates. We post all of our upcoming videos. We've got a ton of our legal series on there as well. We've got a new legal series that we're going to call the Walkthrough, where our legal team will be doing a literal walkthrough of each of our most popular forms and contracts. And if you subscribe today, if you're not subscribed already, make sure you check that alert button. I don't know, Tiara, Byron, I think it looks like a little bell, right? They click on the bell and you get an alert when we go live with the new video. So please subscribe today so that you can always have the latest videos from SCR posted in your channel. So I think Byron's going to add the YouTube channel link in the comments. Thank you, Byron. And so while you are watching our presentation, please feel free type in your questions in the chat. Toward the end of the program, we will make every effort to address your questions. We've got an hour scheduled for the program today, and we'll get through as many as we can. If we don't get to your question today, please contact the legal hotline. You can reach Byron or Tiara or myself, and we'll be happy to answer your questions individually. Before we get started, I want to introduce and welcome. I'm very honored today to be joined by your SCR president, Corwin Millett, our chief legal officer, Byron King, and our ethics and legal compliance counsel, Tiara Pitts. Thank y'all for joining me today. Corwin?
Thank you. Thank you. For those who may live in the Midlands, guys, I just want to know who had on their bingo card for 2026 an earthquake. Trustfully, all is well. Everyone and everyone's properties are doing well, but I'm excited to be here today, Nick, so we'll have a good time.
Awesome, awesome. I see we are at capacity in the room. We've got 1,000 members on the call. Just as a housekeeping tip, this is also streaming live. So if you've got a notice or an email saying that, hey, we're at capacity, click on the YouTube link. That's what the overcapacity is going to. So check us out. And feel free to let us know what is on your mind in the chat. The other members of our team here are General Counsel Byron King. Byron?
Thanks, Nick. You want me to give the antitrust briefing real quick?
Absolutely. That's always an important way, always a great way to start a meeting.
Thanks. Okay, don't do that. Antitrust, don't do that. That means don't talk about commission fixing, where a lot of competitors are in the chat. So no commission fixing, price fixing. No talking about group boycotts of other brokerages or service providers. No dividing up market share. And I'll post this into the chat as well. So don't do any antitrust.
Thanks, Byron. Hey, why don't you share that link to the NAR's new video on antitrust that their legal team produced? Great one to share. Great one to present before meetings locally. So, Tiara, welcome.
Hi, everyone. Excited to be here with you guys today and cover these changes before the launch date. We're already seeing questions, but this goes into effect March 9th. So tune in or tell people to go to YouTube if they can't get on this call right now.
Awesome. Thank you all for joining me today. We're going to be covering forms and FinCEN. And so let's start with forms. Let's get right into it. As you know, our industry has been shifting and evolving since the national settlement was announced. And I don't think, and we're not talking about earthquakes. We definitely felt that in Colombia yesterday, shaken but not stirred, as I told a lot of folks. First for me, I've never actually experienced an earthquake. It was a magnitude of, I think it was a 3 on the Richter scale. So that's pretty strong for the Columbia area. And we have been continuing to evolve these forms and our discussions and certainly our research around everything that's been happening in the industry. Last month, the SCR Board of Directors met and voted overwhelmingly to approve changes to the SCR listing agreement. And that's why we're here today. We're going to try to explain these changes to you so that you're prepared as these new forms roll out. If there's a word of the day to focus on is the word is negotiation. And I think that's been the focus of the settlement. That's been the focus of our business practices as we have moved into this new post-settlement era of the real estate business. So the days of the listing broker automatically splitting their fee with a buyer broker in the listing agreement is gone. The new form will eliminate broker-to-broker compensation. That option is going to entirely be gone, and it's being eliminated to help keep members compliant and clear. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what that looks like on paper, and specifically focusing on the important new or updated sections of the listing agreement.
So you're right, Nick. But before we start, I want to take a few moments to provide some rationale. And I want to add in this. It's not about what you're losing, it's about what you're gaining. I want to give you some rationale while removing broker-to-broker offers of compensation from our listing agreements isn't just a compliance hoop that we're theoretically jumping through. It's about eliminating steering and reducing future risk to you as brokers as well as licensees. We have to look at what actually got us here. You know, many people say that what got the industry in trouble. And the core argument in all those lawsuits was that by having the listing broker to pay the buyer broker through the MLS, buyer brokers were steering or only showing properties that matched their buyer broker compensation agreement with the buyer. The plaintiff's lawyers showed the jury in Missouri trial evidence, clear evidence of financial steering by the defendants. By removing broker-to-broker compensation from the listing agreement, we are effectively cutting that cord that tied us to the liability. It stops any accusations of steering based on offers of compensation. When we eliminate broker-to-broker compensation when we eliminate direct broker-to-broker payment or compensation, the transaction now is easier to explain and to negotiate. The buyer agrees to pay their representative, the seller agrees to pay theirs. Now, please, let's be clear. Buyer agents can still negotiate with the seller through their listing agent for compensation through a compensation agreement or through concessions in the sales contract. I'm going to repeat that. Buyer agents can still negotiate with the seller in their offer through obviously the listing agent for compensation through either a compensation agreement or through concessions in the sales contract. This is much cleaner and it's more transparent. So we aren't just doing this to satisfy, if you will, the current settlement. We're doing it because it protects our brokerages and our members from future lawsuits. And we're not alone. Our research has shown that 19 other states have already removed broker-to-broker compensation from their forms. In addition to form changes, 5 more states have enacted regulatory or legislative changes effectively eliminating broker-to-broker compensation, with 2 more working to do the same. And we just heard this week that North Carolina plans to remove broker-to-broker compensation from their forms later this summer. All this is happening while the Department of Justice, DOJ, as we like to use the acronym, continues their crusade to decouple commissions.
Yeah, those are great insights, Corwin. I appreciate it. So let's jump right in. Byron.
Thank you, Nick. First, let's look at Section 5 of the new Form 220. This section defines how the listing agent gets paid. Previously, old Form 220 had a section dealing with compensation to other brokerages. That section is gone. Section 5 now strictly defines the listing broker compensation as the fee the owner pays to the listing firm for their listing services. No matter how the listing agent calculates the fees, the listing broker compensation amount is now only for the work the listing agent does to list and market the home. It does not include compensation to pass on to a buyer's agent.
Yes, exactly right, Byron. And moving right along to section 6, we are going to cover unrepresented buyers in this section. This addresses the situation where extra compensation for extra work that comes with working with an unrepresented buyer. So that's if a buyer comes to the table without an agent, you as the listing agent often end up doing double the work, like writing the offer, handling paperwork, and managing the process. Without an agent means no buyer agent or transaction broker is working with the buyer, so they are fully unrepresented. In this section of the listing agreement, it says that it tells a seller that a listing agent working with an unrepresented buyer can create extra work and extra liability, and this is a great opportunity for the listing agent to showcase their value and their loyalty to the seller. Because of that extra risk and that extra work, this section allows you to negotiate an upfront additional fee, which can be in the form of a set dollar amount or a percentage. This ensures that you get paid for the extra liability of managing an unrepresented buyer without accidentally creating an undisclosed dual agency situation. This is an option for listing companies. Not every company charges fees, so this is dependent on the company that you're working for.
Thanks, Tira. Going to Section 7, this is the most important update in the entire agreement. This Section 7 states clearly the listing broker is not authorized to compensate any other buyer broker. Make sure your seller understands this. The listing firm cannot pay the buyer broker, the buyer's agent, from their funds anymore. The split is dead in this contract. So how does the buyer agent get paid? Section 7 gives the seller 2 options. Number 1, direct negotiation. The seller can negotiate compensation directly with the buyer broker using Form 120. Number 2, transaction cost. The seller can negotiate with the buyer directly to cover an agreed upon amount of the buyer's cost, also sometimes referred to as seller concessions, and you do this by using Form 310. This gives the seller full disclosure over your fees and what to expect in terms of future negotiations with a buyer.
Yeah, and let me be clear, because there's a couple of comments in the chat already about this. We're not talking about the seller or we're not talking about the buyer broker negotiating directly with the seller when the seller is represented by a listing agent, right? These are negotiations that take place through the agents in the transaction. We're certainly not contemplating any ethical or even legal agency interference here. So when you're negotiating, it's the buyer's agent presenting the Form 120 along with the contract offer, or it's the buyer agent presenting the offer that contains the request for concessions to the listing agent. That process doesn't change and isn't impacted by these changes in the form. Tiara?
Absolutely. Thank you, Nick, for that clarification. So moving on to Section 8, this is our final one of the sections we updated, is about owner concessions. This is where we distinguish between compensation, which is paying the agent, and concessions, which is helping the buyer. This form reminds the seller that concessions are fully negotiable, but you can't forget to check the box. You'll see a box where the owner agrees or does not agree to allow the listing broker to advertise their willingness to negotiate concessions. And you may be asking why check yes or why check no. Checking yes gives you permission to advertise that the seller is willing to consider concessions in your marketing. This can be a huge green flag for cash-strapped buyers. Checking no could be a smart negotiation tool in a hot market because why would you advertise concessions if you're expecting to receive multiple offers? Choose wisely, know your market data, and remember to put your client's best interest first.
That's a great review. I appreciate it, Byron and Tiara. Thank you. We're also adding a new security feature across all of our forms that are going to be incorporated into the copyright text. And that's going to appear at the very bottom of each form. When you log into your zip form account, .loop, etc., your name and contact information are automatically going to populate in this new copyright clause. This is a security feature. It's going to ensure that only realtors are using these forms. These are a member service for our members, and that their member account isn't being used by someone who's not a realtor member. So a way of ensuring our great member service here. So to recap, we're addressing in the new listing agreement an option for an extra fee if working with an unrepresented buyer. Unrepresented buyer means no buyer agency, no transaction brokerage, literally what it says, unrepresented, no agent on the buyer side of the equation at all. It clarifies that broker-to-broker compensation is not going to be facilitated through these SCR forms going forward. And finally, regarding concessions, it addresses this issue with a seller and allows the seller to give permission, yes or no, whether or not they want their agent to advertise concessions. The change in the listing agreement requires updates to a number of other forms. Broker-to-broker compensation is mentioned in several other forms. These are all going to be part of the new forms rollout on March 9th. And as Byron and Tara have already said, these forms have been on our website now for about 10 or 11 days. The latest version of those forms are found under the draft button. It's a very bottom of that scrrealtors.org/forms page. And you can check these out now. You can check them out today. Tiara, I think you had one additional thought here before we go to our final topic today.
Yes, this is a question that we've been getting. What do you do about agreements that are already signed? So you already have an existing listing agreement that will be valid further out than the March 9th date. Do you have to get new agreements signed is the main question. First, updating existing agreements is not a legal mandate. However, the SCR legal team advises that updating agreements could be a best practice when it's practical to do so. For example, when you're not yet under contract, so that's lower risk, and your brokerage will not be participating in broker-to-broker compensation moving forward. If those two things are there, then it might be a good idea to update because we'll no longer have Form 120 broker to broker compensation between the two companies. We'll only have seller to buyer broker compensation. In that case, it may make sense to bring your existing agreements into alignment with this new structure. That being said, it is a business decision and should be discussed with your company counsel and leadership. One thing that is not optional is our forms policy. Once the new forms are released, you cannot use older forms, even if you like those better. You have to stay into compliance and use these updated forms going forward. So the takeaway is this. Updating older agreements is not legally required in every situation, but using the new forms moving forward absolutely is. Thank you, Nick.
No, thank you, Tiara. We're getting a lot of great questions in the chat. I can't wait to dive into those. But before we do, we have one more topic to cover with you. And this is, well, I guess it's kind of related to the forms changes because we're incorporating some of this in there. But at the same time, it's a completely unrelated topic. And that's FinCEN. You've probably read a lot about FinCEN. Hopefully by now you know a little bit more than you did a few weeks ago. But FinCEN stands for Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. It's a department of the U.S. Treasury Department. And going forward, it's going to affect how realtors handle cash deals that involve entity buyers and residential real estate moving forward. Now, this is a rule that is a federal regulation, and it will be taking effect on March 1st, next week, literally right around the corner. And closing attorneys, hopefully by now, have been brought up to speed. We've done a lot of work over the last month. I've even participated in pushing out training at the Bar Association with the Real Estate Council. But even with all of that, as you know, you may likely run into a closing attorney that doesn't or isn't aware of these changes that are coming up. So we're going to talk to you about what these changes are and what your duties and obligations are. So let's break this down, Tiara. Let's tell our members exactly what this is.
Yeah, so what exactly it is, it's the federal government cracking down on money laundering in real estate. Specifically, they want to know the actual humans, the beneficial owners hiding behind LLCs and trusts that buy houses with cash. In the past, we've seen geographic targeting orders that applied to certain expensive areas. Now, those are gone, and this new rule is permanent and nationwide. It doesn't matter if the house is worth 50,000 or 5 million. If the transaction fits three specific criteria, it must be reported. And I'll turn it over to Byron to tell you what those three criteria are.
Thanks, Tara. FinCEN comes down to three simple triggers. If you hit all three of these following three triggers, the rule is going to apply to your closing attorney inputting the information into the FinCEN website. First trigger, is it residential? If yes, it's residential, then FinCEN with the other two triggers will apply. If it's residential and the buyer is an entity, that is, are they buying as an LLC, a corporation, a partnership, or a trust? Yes, then FinCEN is going to apply to entities. So if you got residential and an entity, the third trigger you have to have is the transaction non-financed. This means there is no traditional bank involved that already does the anti-money laundering checks. If you have all three, residential, it's an entity, and non-finance, then yes, FinCEN applies to cash deals and private lender deals, and your closing attorney is going to input the data into the website. If you have a cash buyer purchasing in an LLC name, this is a reportable transaction to the closing attorneys under FinCEN. Thank you.
Thank you. Now let's talk about how this impacts you as realtors. The closing attorney is responsible for filing this report, not you. However, the closing attorney cannot close the deal unless they get specific sensitive information from your buyer. They're going to need names, addresses, dates of birth, and even bank account information for the beneficial owners of the LLCs. So something to note is that a closing attorney is authorized to delay closing if they don't get this info. So you need to warn your clients that the closing attorney may charge an additional fee to process this filing, that they may be asking for this information, and to reassure them that this data goes directly to FinCEN, the federal government. It is not recorded in the public land records for their neighbors to see. So you're going to be managing expectations and getting that information on the front end to be in compliance with this.
So realtors, not fake tours, what is your job? So first of all, you don't have to practice phlebotomy. You ain't got to take anybody's blood or take any DNA swabs or any samples or anything from anyone. You got three tasks. First, set your expectations early with the client, right? When you write an offer for an LLC cash buyer, let them know, hey, just so you know, federal law now requires the closing attorney to collect your personal beneficial ownership information before we can close. Number two, don't be the bottleneck. Nobody wants to be the problem, right? So encourage your client to send the data in as soon as possible, immediately after the closing attorney requests it. Number 3, and this is most important, you can't opt out. This is a mandate. It is required. It is not an option not to participate. This is federal law, not a closing attorney policy, and most certainly not a realtor policy. Bottom line, realtors, you don't have to do the paperwork, but you do have to and should manage the client's expectations so they don't get blindsided at the closing table. Nick?
No, great information, everyone. And, an entity buyer is someone, it could be an LLC, it can be an S corp, it can be a trust. There are a number of categories that can fall into this. The key thing to remember, if your buyer is not buying the property in their name, but in some corporate entity, and they're paying cash, or they're self-financing, or they've got some money coming from a non-traditional lender, a non-federal bank, a non-federal mortgage product, and they're buying residential real estate, even if it's undeveloped residential real estate. All 3 of those triggers have been met, and the closing attorney now is going to have to collect and disclose a lot of information. They're likely to charge you more for it. And the key here is just to identify that up front and warn your clients that there's going to be some extra paperwork to avoid a delay in closing. So anytime there's an entity buyer, cash, non-traditional financing, residential real estate, the FinCEN rule applies. You don't have to parse out every particular detail of this. There are exemptions to the law. There are some kind of very legalistic, screwy things that the Treasury Department has put into this. You don't need to figure that out. All you have to do is warn your clients, let the closing attorney know as soon as possible, and the closing attorney will sort it out. Okay? So that kicks in next week. We estimate about 20% of all transactions last year in South Carolina would have been impacted by this rule. So we're not talking about a minuscule percentage. So be prepared. One final point on FinCEN. We are adding disclosure language in the sales agreements, the 300s, and we are also creating a new form. It's going to be titled Form 800, a FinCEN addendum, that'll be included in this rollout on March 9th. So realtors, thank you for joining our update today, and we appreciate you tuning in.